Mark, how you doing tonight? Always good to see the people that come back. All right, guys, welcome. Okay, after some tech issues, gonna figure out the YouTube stuff another day. Today's not the day. All right, if this is your first time joining, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach, and I help people go from being in a dark place, processing the emotions that are associated with complex PTSD, childhood trauma, those kind of things. I help you go from being in a dark place, anxious, depressed, suicidal, any of those things, into being in a happier state. And that being said, that doesn't always mean you're like always happy, sunshine, and rainbows. There's a process to this, and there's different emotions that we need to be able to feel and do that in a way that's healthy, in a way that's safe, so that we can live those happier lives. Okay, so my goal is to be able to help 1 million people heal past trauma. I do this by sharing my experience, strength, and hope. These are real, live, day-to-day tools that I use every day, day in, day out. So this is what I use to be able to get through some of my stuff, and to be able to process that in a healthy way so that I can feel happier. And I share these with you guys on this channel. If you're catching late, you can watch the replays on my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. And eventually I'll be streaming live there as well. So guys, tap the screen, share the live, so that we can reach more people. It helps boost the algorithm. Those that are on Facebook, if you could type in hashtag live if you're watching it live, or hashtag replay if you're catching the replay, just so that I can help reach more people and share the stuff. And of course, if you find this beneficial, share the video as well, okay? All right, so tonight we have a great topic that we're going to go through, 3 actually, and I've got lots of stories to go with them and back this stuff up. So the first topic is talking about strong women. So my background is in transportation and logistics, and I loved working there, and most of the time the women that I worked with are actually very strong women. And sometimes today was one of those days I kind of miss having some of those strong women around, because we were good at being able to roll with the punches. We knew how to deal with some of the stuff, and we weren't timid. We knew how to be very resilient with stuff. And that being said, we were also women, so we sometimes would go for coffee. Christine, if you're watching this, I miss being able to go for a coffee and a smoke break with you, even though I didn't smoke, just to vent some of the stuff out so that we didn't kill people. That was a great thing. So sometimes women need to vent some things. I don't do that as much, especially working from home by myself most of the time. But how I do that now is if I'm having or I'm feeling frustrations for different things, whatever the reason may be. It could be sometimes working through some old trauma, sometimes it is just day-to-day frustration, sometimes it's disappointment that ends up happening, and there's anger and frustration that comes up. And one of the healthiest ways that I've found to deal with that is by writing those emotions out so I don't act them out. There's a big difference. And back when I first started in recovery, I didn't have a whole lot of emotional regulation, and I've developed a lot better skills. But before, I used to react. I'd get really, really emotional. I'd say things, I'd just go off. And the funny thing is probably some people are like, damn, if she used to be worse like me. So I would just fly off the handle before, and I'd say things I didn't mean, and then I'd hurt people's feelings and stuff like that. So now I reserve that for a journal. And when we were in early recovery, one of the rules in the household is that you could leave your journal laying out anywhere, and nobody was allowed to read it. And if they did read it, it was their own fault for reading something like that, because it was so important for us to have that trust to be able to actually purge whatever emotions that we were going through. And we had to do that in a level of safety where you weren't allowed to read somebody else's journal. You weren't allowed to read their thoughts. Just so that they could get them out, especially if they're trying to process emotions in a more healthy way. So you're allowed to feel those things, and I find a lot of times, especially with angry emotions, I will be able to write those things down, and when I process them through the writing, I then forget them. They're gone. It's out of my head, and I don't know if it's an Aries temper thing or what, but that was a much more effective way with dealing with my angry emotions, or that initial like short fuse reaction kind of thing. And a lot of that times that short fuse reaction was because of growing up in a traumatic environment. And even it's all a matter of perspective and experience, right? So the stuff I went through, mine was like not even an issue compared to the stuff I saw. But when you get into environments where people have not been through that kind of stuff, they get very intimidated and very frightened by, angry emotions and stuff like that. And I know the difference of like when it got to the point of being dangerous, right? So I know how to watch for that kind of stuff. And I'm also very hyper vigilant about it, which is not good because I'm also very sensitive when other people are angry, and I often jump in to be that peacemaker. I'm like the bomb diffuser kind of, jump in there and diffuse the bomb and kind of calm everybody down before it gets escalated out of control. And that's how a lot of times I would deal with angry situations, whether that's at work, at home, wherever, right? I would try to jump in and know preemptively what kind of things, where it could possibly escalate. But once I got into certain environments though, so example, a friend of mine and her and I have very similar backgrounds, and we would, kind of talk angrily, I guess, but we were just more, to us it seemed we were just passionate. A lot of other people though would listen to us and they're like, holy shit, they're fighting. It's like, no, we're not fighting, we're just kind of going back and forth, and we're just like half venting, half doing all kinds of, angry voices and stuff like that. So it's a matter of perspective, of understanding what's okay, what's not, and getting used to those kind of things, but also being aware of other people's reactions to something that you may find normal. And it's not that scary. And it's like, and so sometimes just even calmly speaking your truth about something, somebody else might find that as like, oh, they must be really angry because they came in from a situation where they were, not allowed to speak up about certain things. So the very act of even calmly speaking up about something that is bothering them is something that is very threatening to somebody, right? So you have to keep in mind different people's backgrounds of how they may possibly react to a certain situation. And so like I said, as I started in my early recovery, I started to realize that some of my reactions were not good and they were not healthy. They didn't align with who I saw myself as and who I saw myself wanting to be. And so like before, it was normal for physical violence to happen in the household, like even joking physical violence. So like my brother and I, we would fight all the time. And, it was nothing to just haul off and hit each other. And that was normal for us. But when I started recovery and I started therapy, and I realized that it's like, I don't actually want to be doing this. And when I saw the effects of it, and it's like, oh, and I started to understand that doing that kind of stuff is not good, especially since we grew up with that. That was normal for us. So to give each other a shot in the arm or smack in the head or any of that kind of stuff, that was just normal. That wasn't even considered violent compared to what we saw, right? There were no guns out, no furniture got broken. So, but when I made that connection, I remember making amends to him, and I apologized for the things that I had done, and I had promised that I would never ever lay a hand on him again or raise my voice to him again. And I've kept that promise, and I've followed through with it. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't get angry about it, but I now control my reaction. And I think it's extremely important that if we want a safe household, if we want a safe environment, that it's not just men that have to worry about, you know, oh, they can't be too angry, they can't be too like violent and stuff like that. And a lot of times I would see other couples or other people interacting, and that they felt justified in certain behaviors, that they could just lash out and just, I've seen women tear down men like crazy, and to me it's unacceptable. It's like, I wouldn't want him to do that to me, so there's no way that I would do that to them. Now, this doesn't mean you don't get angry, you don't make mistakes and stuff like that, but I think it's just as important for women to control their emotions as it is for men to control theirs. And emotional regulation is all our own responsibility, right? And we can say that, well, I couldn't help myself, he just made me so mad. And it's like, okay, I get that. And there's sometimes they'll deliberately, because trust me, my brother went out of his way to try and get some sort of reaction out of me, because that was how he was used to getting attention. And so he would do all kinds of pranks, just trying to push the buttons, push the buttons, push the buttons. And I had to learn not to react to that, because it was so important for me not to lash out, not to continue the pattern of violence that we grew up in. And so understanding that it's just as important that we always look back to our reactions, and it can be so easy when we're in that angry state. We have to understand, where are we at, how short of a fuse do we have, and what is our reactions. We cannot control the feelings that come up. The feelings that come up are what are supposed to come up. They're a signal. There's something there that you need to process, but we can control our reactions, and we can choose not to react to a certain situation, especially if we're in an angry state. Do not make those decisions. Do not lash out and say something that you will regret. So find yourself, buy yourself that time, calm yourself down, whatever it is that you need to do, and build up tools to be able to do this, so that you do not create toxicity in relationships, in whether that's work, family, spouse, whatever it is, that you make sure that you deal with the emotions that are going on with you. And the thing is what I found is, when I do that anger work, most of the time, especially when I'm journaling, is I end up seeing that the frustrations that I'm feeling are all tied back to fear. I'm afraid of something. I'm afraid of not being enough. I'm afraid of making a mistake. I'm afraid of that somebody's trying to hurt me. Any of those kind of things, that you end up having this defensive, angry reaction, and it's really important not to react to that, okay? And to be, that doesn't mean don't set boundaries. Doesn't mean don't talk about it. You have to come back and you have to talk that out reasonably and understand it, but doing it in a way of logic, right? And this isn't saying that emotions are bad. They're just signals. They are input, and we need to interpret the data properly, okay? And this is what I loved about working in logistics with strong women, is because we all kind of knew that. So yes, and for whatever reason, it's like we also had this higher standard, because you couldn't act like a girly girl, because then you wouldn't get respected, and then you also wouldn't get the job done. So you had to be able to manage your emotions. Yet the same thing is we would often see that men how they would deal with their emotions. Fear is not acceptable. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to get upset. And the only emotion that men typically are allowed to express is anger. That's an acceptable emotion because that's powerful, right? That's really strong. But the thing is it's still tied to fear. And understanding that when you're dealing with something and you dig down to it, you see what the fear is and where that stems from, and that is false evidence appearing real. So it's like, okay, understanding, am I really under attack? Is this really a threat? Can I talk to somebody? Is this somebody that's actually supportive? Can I actually talk out what is going on within me to be able to say, you know what, I did this thing because I thought you were going to do this and that upset me, and so oftentimes the best defense is a good offense, and oftentimes that is something that we do. We go into attack mode, and that is not a good thing, right? Because that starts, and that could be something simple. It doesn't have to be like full-on war kind of thing, but even to the point of like sarcasm, right? I remember a long time ago when I first learned about the word sarcasm and the origins of it. It means to tear the flesh. And so when you are verbally being sarcastic with somebody and giving them that little dig, what you're doing is you're verbally tearing their flesh, and you're trying to tear them down. And again, that is not in alignment with who I see myself as, so therefore that is not a good behavior, and I do not practice that, although sometimes I will slip in, depending on the peer group that I'm around. Some, it's kind of like it's a norm thing, and you can be sarcastic, like, you know, there's one thing, it's like, you know, calling somebody, it's like, if you call somebody a bitch, right, it's like, oh, you're a bitch. There's that kind of bitch. It's like, come on, bitch. You know, there's a more friendly tone. There's a different way to do it. So it matters your audience, who you're speaking to, who you're communicating with, as to what you can get away with. And you have to err on the side of caution until you actually know that person well enough to know whether or not you can actually get away with that. Which is something that's actually very funny, because when I'm around people that I first meet, I find it funny that they're always trying to correct their, like, if they swear or they do any of that kind of stuff, because they think that I'm prissy. And I don't know if you guys have been listening long enough that you know that that's not the case. And I probably would make a trucker blush with the amount of F-bombs that I drop. That being said, to me, it's punctuation. It's like seasoning. It's not a big deal. Right? So, in dealing with those kind of things, so dealing with your anger, it's a good signal. And there's good anger and then there's bad anger. So, bad anger, we all know what that is. It's destructive, it's not productive, it is harmful, it's damaging, and it hurts people. And even if you don't actually verbalize that anger, people can feel that energy. Now, that's the one part that it can't control, right? So if I'm feeling angry, and at least I can close my mouth, but I cannot manage the energy right away. I need some time to process that. So how do you deal with that when you know that somebody, they can pick up by your facial features, they can pick up by your energy, you're tense, you're irritated. Oftentimes what I like to do is I like to at least communicate. It's like, you know what, I'm feeling a little frustrated right now. I need some time to process this, but I will talk to you. I just need a little bit of time to calm down. So know what it is that you need so that you can manage the reaction, okay? And being able to speak that takes some practice. And sometimes people won't. And if they don't respect that, you still have to stay calm and repeat it and say, no, I'm serious. I'm going to actually go now. I've hung up on customers because I know that they were crossing the line. I had that. There was one customer that I was dealing with years ago. And this guy, he went off on me, like way off, like calling me all kinds of names and just like completely unprofessional. And I was mad, but I remained calm. And the important part of remaining calm is that when you do that, because if you attack back, that gives the person who was lashing out in anger justification and proof that it's like, see, I was justified in my anger. I was justified in hurting them. And so now you've contributed to the problem, you've added to it, and they believe that, you know, they were justified in that. When you choose not to react, then they have no choice but to look at how they have behaved. And oftentimes what you'll find is like they were upset or frustrated about something that had nothing to do with you. And, you know, we had this famous saying of shit rolls downhill, right? You know, so the top boss gets mad about something and then it just kind of goes down, trickle down effect, right? And then wonders why the people at the bottom are, you know, having a bad attitude. They have no idea that it was connected with something that they did, that they didn't even talk to the people at the bottom, but they did talk to their other managers. And that anger, that fear trickles down and it spreads throughout the environment in the business, and that is not a good thing. But you don't realize the connections there, and then you wonder why. So this is why, especially in leadership, it is important to look at the anger that you feel, look at the frustrations that you feel, have a peer group or a safety place, someplace that you can actually talk out and vent out those frustrations, just like our coffee breaks and our smoke breaks when I would deal with my boss that I worked with. And those were good because she had a really short fuse. She made me look calm, cool, collected, like so smooth. And like she was kind of like she'd go off, and she was known for her temper and making people cry back when she was younger. She mellowed as she got older, but like she would like go off on somebody, no problem. My anger is a little bit different in that I was a calming influence on her. I could listen to her anger, and I could actually find it funny most of the time, right? Because it's like, you know, I could appreciate her frustration, and because I would laugh at it and not get bent out of shape about it, it helped her stay calm, and it allowed her a place to release those emotions without being upset about anything. And I didn't see her any differently. I didn't see her as scary. I didn't see her as a bad person, any of that kind of stuff. So just being accepting of that frustration and anger that she was feeling allowed her to dissipate the fear that she was feeling, and allowed her to calm down, and now she can see it through logic, right? And oftentimes women do process emotions first, and then once they vent them out, then they can express it through logic, where men oftentimes are a little bit different, where they go logic first, and then after that has been heard, then they can get to the emotional part, right? So, and this is where men and women oftentimes will clash because of the way that they process things. Logic first for men, emotions first for women, and then you end up trying to deal with a woman's emotions through logic, and then you end up having battles that happen, and that's not a good thing. And she just needs to vent some of that stuff out. Once she vents it out, then she can get to the point of dealing logically and understanding your side, and then she can also hear your emotions of what is bothering you. So oftentimes men don't listen to those kind of things, and they get afraid when a woman is upset, and they like act like she's on fire and gotta try and put her out. Trust me guys, if she's still bitching at you, if she's still frustrated with you, if she still gets angry, first of all, number one, no, it's a fear reaction. It's probably more hurt than anger. And number two, that you should be more afraid if she starts getting quiet and she just stops caring. That's your danger zone, okay? And I think the same goes for men. I'm only speaking from my experience for women, right? Of how that happens. But I think I can't speak for men of how they process it. I can only offer my observations of what I've seen with those things. But we're all human, so we all have emotions, and we've just been conditioned to process those in different ways, okay? So look at any children. Little boys cry just as much as little girls, and then they get conditioned to do differently, right? So whether it's men or women, I think it's very important for us all to be able to control our emotions, control our anger, and not control our anger, control how we respond to the feelings that we have. Whether it's anger, fear, frustrations, any of those kind of things, it's really important to deal with those kind of things. Now, we all are human. We make mistakes. We are going to screw this up. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Okay? And this is where forgiveness actually has to come in play. And it also happens to, it's important for us to recognize where we actually made those mistakes and where we might have done something to break trust. Okay? So I'm going to tell a story about some cats now. Okay, so I'm going to dive into some of the crazy cat lady stories, but I'm going to tie this back so that you have a good example of how this applies. And this applies not only in personal relationships, but I want you to think of how this applies in business relationships as well too. So my cat, Normal, she's my orange fluffy cat, and she keeps getting this like reaction thing on her mouth, and it's like she scratches it and then it ends up bleeding. And so I'll take some Bactin spray, and then I have some ointment that I put on her. And she was pretty good with letting me do that. And I would spray down a tissue, and then I press it on there, and she would be patient, and she let me do that, and she had like trust, and it was okay, because she would actually come to me too when it was bothering her a little bit. She'd kind of come and rub up against me and let me know that she kind of needed some help. But this one time, it was particularly bad, and instead of spraying the tissue, I sprayed it directly on her face, since she didn't seem to mind me doing stuff. Well, she did not like that spray. That was a huge trigger for her. It was a huge red flag, and now every time I go to try and help her with this thing, she has trust issues because I triggered her. So this very thing can happen. It can be something very small, very unintentional, and you're just trying to do things in a little bit more of an efficient way, and you're like, oh shit, I triggered the trust. Now she doesn't trust me. Now and she would, anytime I go to try and pet her or pick her up or any of that kind of stuff, she's like, no, what are you doing? I don't trust you, back away. Get away, right? Even though she wants it, she needs that help. She's coming to me for that help, but now it's like, no, I don't have any trust for you. You're going to have to rebuild this. So I could forcefully try and grab her and just force her to do that, which of course she now has to up the ante, and the fear aggression starts even harder, where she'll growl and she'll hiss and she'll get mad and she'll get upset and all those kind of things. And it's not because I've done anything in particular to hurt her, but now she's on high alert. So trying to force somebody who is on high alert to conform or do something, you have to rebuild that trust, because all it's going to do is re-aggravate that and just add confirmation, because all she's doing at that point is looking, are you going to do this shit again to me? Yeah, you are. Yep, I knew it. And she'll just take off, right? So it's like trying to give any kind of pet a pill or anything like that. Especially if it kind of made them a bit nauseous, then they will just like take off as soon as they hear the wrapper opening. Like, so this is something that even humans do. Like, we start to pick up certain cues. It's like, oh, well, the last time you Frank, that particular thing, you got really crazy and it just went over the rails, right? So it's like, oh, okay, they're into that again, so now high alert, right? So those are little cues that we start to pick up. And then, so my method for being able to rebuild that trust with her is I have to interact with her more now, without triggering that or without trying to do anything to her, just letting her know that she is safe in my presence and I'm not going to fuck with her. Okay, so this is kind of what I would have to do and try and rebuild that with her. And so that meant I have to go out of my way now. I have to pet her, I have to pick her up, I have to snuggle her without trying to do anything. And this includes, like, so if she has like eye jam in her eyes, and trying to clean that out of there. And I've done that before too with the cats. It's like sometimes it's like you get busy, and I'd watch myself where I'd be like, oh, I realized I hadn't really pet the cat nice by touch them, just trying to clean out their eyes and take care of them and stuff like that. I don't know, it's like a mom thing, right? You just kind of get busy and you're so busy kind of cleaning them up and taking care of them that you forget, oh, they also need snuggles, right? And this is why they typically end up loving daddy more, because he'll play with them and you're doing all the work stuff, right? So, so learning to build that trust and do that with consistent effort, and then reintegrate the thing that they need into the process. So this can be done with employees as well. So if you've done something where maybe you were not on your best behavior one day and now they're like a little bit afraid to ask you a question because you snapped at them the other day, right? So this is where you as a leader have to make that extra effort. You have to speak with them more. You have to let them know that it's okay. And it's not kissing their ass, so don't go down that road and coddling them and, oh, why do I have to do all this stuff? Well, because you don't want the long-term effect of it. So the sooner that you deal with that and address it, the better, right? Because if this stuff sits, it festers, and then next thing you know, they're acting like they've got attitude, and you're like, well, what the fuck, right? So this is why it's important to be fully aware of your behaviors and taking that ownership, that responsibility to go through that stuff. And this isn't saying that you can't be human. You absolutely can be human. Just be transparent about it. And if you're forthcoming with it, that will also encourage them to be forthcoming with what's going on with them. Because what we have to remember is that we cannot solve any problem if we are not able to talk about it. And oftentimes there were too many unspoken rules that you're not allowed to talk about this particular thing. You're not allowed to tell your boss that you're fucking angry with him. Why? Because you might lose your job. What if the boss doesn't like what you have to say? Is there a way that you have to be able to communicate fairly, without attacking, that you were upset about something? Because you know what? There's been plenty of times, I don't know about you guys, there's been plenty of times that I've gotten upset about something, and it was more a defensive reaction rather than really what was being done. I do this with like YouTube videos. I'll listen and I'll be like, something will upset me, and I listen to the whole video through that stupid filter. Give it a good night's sleep, go back, rewatch it, and it's like, oh, now I hear it in a completely different way, and it's like it wasn't that way at all. I've done this with emails too at work. It's like where you read somebody's email and you aren't aware, and you're just like, you know what, I've had enough. And then you fire off that email back and you blast somebody. And then afterwards you go back and you read the email and you're like, oh, yeah, I might have overreacted a smidge there. And then how do you deal with that? So I know a lot of times too, even when you're not trying to be, I've had to do this in my corporate career. I got told my emails were too direct. So I had to learn to fluff them up a bit. So I would write my direct email first, direct to the point, and then I'd be like, okay, now how can I soften this so that it's like, oh, hi, so and so. I hope that you're having a great day. So I have to add that in, because if not, when I'm in task mode, I will just fire stuff off. And it's not because I don't care. I'm actually quite a marshmallow in how I deal with people, and very kind. And it actually upsets me when I find out that I actually hurt somebody's feelings, which I think for some reason some people don't like to tell me that, because then I get upset, and it's like, I'm not trying to take over yours. It's like, I'm devastated because I try so diligently not to do those kind of things. But even with the best of intentions, we make mistakes, or we're unaware. But if we can't communicate, then we can't clear up misunderstandings, right? So, and knowing that somebody can express how they felt, that they felt hurt by something that you did, and even if it wasn't intended that way, knowing that it did hurt, and finding ways to correct those behaviors. And that works both ways, right? And being able to be open and listen and to communicate and say, oh, you know what, I did that because of these things. I'm not trying to take away from what was going on with you. And it's not minimizing. I understand how you're feeling, and I respect that, and I'm going to change that. But from my perspective, this is what was going on with me, and I just want to be able to explain those kind of things. So I think those are good forms of communication, and that will bring you closer together rather than pushing you further apart. So, but that can be really scary, especially when you've grown up in abusive environments where if you try to open up, you try to be vulnerable, that just, that was like a gold mine for the narcissist, right? They just weaponize the shit out of that, take that, whatever you said, and beat the hell out of you with it. So then you learn not to speak up. You learn not to say what's going on, and that the only time that you do speak up is when you blow up. And then you feel guilty about those kind of things. We can deal with anger without having to feel the guilt if we control our responses and decide how it is that we're actually going to respond, right? Respond, don't react, right? So if we react, that's where we get into trouble. That's where we cause a lot of damage. That's where we feel all of this friggin' built up guilt and shame and remorse and all of this stupid stuff. All because we haven't been taught how to properly communicate, how to talk this out in a safe way without attacking, without blaming and shaming and all of those kind of things. So it's really a matter of, and one good tip that I use for this is when I am explaining something and I'm saying, this bothered me, I try as much as possible to speak in I statements. I felt this. Not, I felt this when you did this, I felt this. You can kind of explain it a little bit like that, but try to remove you. Because that just kind of gets somebody's back up, and then now instead of listening to you, they feel like they have to defend, because if you're two good people, neither one of you intended to hurt the other one. Okay? Now, maybe sometimes you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to give it as good as I got, right? And when you get, that is a red flag for you to stop. that is a big signal to STFU. Shut the fuck up. Do not say anything. Do not pass go. Do not collect 200. Do not react. It's really, really important, because you're just going to add to the kerosene to the fire. Being able to talk this stuff out, speaking from I statements. I feel this way. When this happened, I felt like this. Is that what you intended? That's a bigger way of handling it, a better way of handling it, so that it's a matter of that the intention of the conversation is to clear the air, to come to some sort of resolution, not to find who was at blame. It's more seeking to understand rather than believing that the other person was wrong and that they deliberately hurt you. And even if they did deliberately hurt you, understanding that it comes from a place of fear, that they were not in a good space. Just like the client that I had or the customer that I had that was screaming all the obscenities on the phone and everything. But because I didn't react, that relationship was able to stay intact. And he actually apologized. He's like, you know what, Tina, I really shouldn't have said all that stuff to you, and I'm really, really sorry. And I was like, fair enough. And I said, fair enough, Frank. I understand. I just also want to say that really wasn't acceptable for you to speak to me. And he's like, yeah, I know. I said, that being said, I know you and I have a good relationship, and you were just having a rough time, and it's okay, but please don't do that again in the future. He never did. And it was really amicable. Hey, Fred, good to see you. So it was really amicable in how we were able to resolve that. So just because there's anger doesn't mean it's a bad thing, okay? Feeling angry within ourselves too, this can be a really good tool if we actually channel it the right way, and we can use it for fuel. There's some things that you're supposed to get angry at. You're supposed to get angry when, you see various injustices happen. You see various wrongdoings happening. You see somebody betraying you or crossing your boundaries. It's normal to get angry, to feel angry. It's our responses that we have to manage, okay? To make sure that we're doing it in the most constructive way, right? Example, you see two little kids, they're fighting and they're hitting each other. Getting angry at them and saying, no, that's not acceptable, is a good thing, right? So it's a good thing to be able to say, no, that's not acceptable. You can't do that. Tina, stop hitting your brother. So those are good things. Even with ourselves, we can get angry and be frustrated with ourselves because frustration isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just we don't know what the answer is, and we're struggling trying to find it out. And just like you would see a baby trying to figure out how to, do something, like maybe get something, their toy or something like that, and they can't get to it, and then they get frustrated, and then they are, there's an internet gif or something. There's a little girl, she holds a hairbrush, and she's like this. I laugh because I see that as me. I'm like, I so could do that. It's like, oh, you look so threatening with your little hairbrush. Like, I'm gonna get you. But if you are in that higher elevated vibration where you're in a state of love, that's basically how you see anybody who's angry. There's two ways. Either you can laugh at it and it's like, oh yeah, I know you're frustrated. You're just, you need a coffee, you need a smoke. Let's just go, it's not a big deal. Come vent and everything's going to be fine. And then there's the other anger where you see it's like, oh, this is kind of scary anger. That is usually, when I see that now, because I've done so much work around understanding my own anger, where it comes from, and seeing it as a fear reaction more than anything. When I see somebody really angry, especially if they're raging about something, and I'm like, wow, they are in a lot of pain. That's automatically my reaction, and I feel so sad, and I just want to hug them when they're like that. Don't try to do that if somebody is really that angry, but I feel so much compassion for them. Hey, Layla. Hey, welcome. So, because I know that if somebody has that much anger, that much rage going on in them, it's uncontrollable hurt. That's okay, I got you. Layla, no worries. Yeah. I've been called worse than Tony, that's for sure. So thank you so much, Layla. It's okay. So, understanding what's behind the anger, and if you see somebody really in a lot of pain, and I don't know, some of this is therapy, some of this is from my years in customer service. because dealing with angry people, clients that were upset, other customers that were upset, just recognizing it, it's like taking it, the principle of whatever it is that they're upset about over personality. Being able to sort out how much of that is a true reflection, and sometimes it's misunderstanding. They have wrong perceptions about something. And being able to really fully hear somebody out when they're in that angry state and hearing what they're saying, not reacting, but being responsive to it, then you can actually help them calm down, because now they feel like, oh, you're actually listening, you're actually trying to understand me, and that comes down, right? Because if they feel like you're going to fight them back, well, now they feel justified in their anger, and it expands, right? So instead of adding to that, we want to detract from that, and we want to respond with love, with kindness, with caring, because that will help mitigate some of the emotion, so that they can calm down, because now they can feel like they are being heard, that you're actually trying to understand them, and you're on their side to solve the challenge that they have. So that's just a customer service thing, and you can actually apply that in your personal life and your professional life and relationships, and even with yourself. So today, dealing with some of my frustrations, journaling that stuff, getting that stuff out of my system. I cannot stress how important that is. Get it out of your system. And then once it's out of your system, then you can look at things calmly, and oftentimes you can, whatever you were feeling, it's just a fleeting moment. It's not a big thing that you don't actually have to. Hello, butterfly. You don't actually have to do anything. A lot of times you can just let things go. It's like, oh, you know what? That's really not that important. Or, you know what? That was just a fear reaction. And now that I've kind of calmed down, it's like, oh, okay, I can see this a little bit more clearly. It's not as frustrating as I thought it was going to be. I can actually get through this. These are some different things that I can do. But you can't see that when the emotions are there and you're in that fight or flight. Can I say hello, Gage? Hello, Gage. There you go. So I don't know why you would do that. So, I should probably be more careful. Something about my spidey sense says that. So anyway, as we're going through this, being able to understand what's going on with your own emotions, being calm, being patient with yourself, feeling those out, and then when you can kind of get the emotions out, then you can feel, walk through it more logically, more calmly. You can choose how you are going to respond instead of just reacting. Okay, so yeah, so those are some of the things that of dealing with strong women, dealing with anger, and dealing with trust issues, of how to rebuild that trust through eyes of forgiveness, being open, communicative, and transparent, authentic, really speaking your truth, and learning to do that in small ways, because sometimes it can be really hard when you have that big scary one and it's like the first time that you're actually speaking up about those kind of things. Practice doing it in smaller ways. Practice doing it in things that don't really matter that much. It's like, so the things that you would normally let slide, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal. That's the time that you actually need to practice talking about that kind of stuff. It may feel very weird. It may feel like you're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's so much better to deal with molehills than it is mountains, okay? If you have a big mountain of a problem, that's a big deal. And that's a lot harder to break down and process through that. So when you learn to recognize how you're feeling in your body, when you're upset, when you're frustrated. Now, I'm not saying go off on every little thing. Make sure that you try to process some of the emotions first. Write it out, journal it out. Give yourself like a little bit of a breather. It's like sometimes I'll give myself some space before I do this. So we had this practice at work too, that If we were frustrated and we've had enough and we're sending an email, we'd write out the email and then we'd save it as a draft. And oftentimes they'd get me to come over and proofread it, because I was really good at being able to professionally tell somebody to go fuck themselves. that's the unfinessed way of saying it. But really, that's what it was. It's like, no, I was really good at being able to change the wording, to be able to put it through, to make it very clear that there were certain boundaries that needed to be followed, that we needed to follow a process without being attacking or punitive or any of that kind of stuff. And oftentimes my emails would end up getting the best response because they could see their part of it. They could also see that I'm not trying to attack them or tear them down in any way, shape, or form, that I am just trying to actually solve the problem. This is how we solve the problem, and let them know. So I would often use like a sandwich technique of positive, critical feedback, and then positive at the end of doing that kind of process. So oftentimes I would end up having to proofread emails and kind of go, yeah, you might want to take this one little line out because that's where you can kind of get yourself in trouble, and then that's a whole other thing. Now you're an hour in the manager's office and you've caused this additional conflict, and there's all these other problems that are happening, and it's just so much less work. So I don't know if this is an altruistic thing that I tend to do, or it's just more efficiency that I tend to gravitate towards this method of being. Because it's just so much more work to have to clean up these messes because you flew off the handle, right? It's just not efficient. It's not effective. So if that appeals to somebody that's a little bit more logic-based, it's not only the touchy-feely, don't hurt people's feelings, all that kind of stuff. It's like, this is just so much more friggin' work to deal with. And it's not productive. It's counterintuitive. It causes so much drama in the business, and it's stuff that you lose track of. How did we end up getting here, right? How did we end up having these kind of problems? Because there's all these little digs that happen, all these little anger issues that don't get dealt with, and they get getting swept under the carpet, not dealt with, not dealt with, not dealt with. Now it blows up and you're like, oh my God, the floor is lava, right? Those are the kind of things that end up happening. And then it's like, oh, wow, this is a complete mess. We got a lot to clean up here. And, you know, you lose good people and all these different things end up happening. And then you end up having hindsight is 20/20 and you're like, ah, damn. That being said, nothing is beyond repair if you're willing to step up, if you're willing to start the process, to be the one that opens up and says, you know what, I maybe didn't behave as good as I should have. I did some things I shouldn't have, and I could see how that would upset you. Having that kind of conversation, and I just want to be able to talk those kind of things out and see if we can hit a reset button. And I know there were some things that you did that were also upsetting to me, and I'd like to talk about those kind of things, but I want to hear what you have to say as well. So set the intention of the conversation. My goal out of this conversation is for us to come away from this where we feel like we've both been heard, we've both been understood, that we are working together to try and find a way that we can solve this. And I understand if that's not something that you want to do. I just know that this is my intention. This is what I would really like to come out of our conversation. And that is a really good way to try and have some of these difficult conversations, of just letting somebody know that you're not there to be their enemy, that you're there to really understand. I'm willing to take ownership for the things I did wrong. I'm willing to look at those things, and I'm willing to talk about maybe some areas that maybe we won't agree on, but it's still important for us to talk them out. So it's not a agree to disagree, because I find that's just so defensive. It's more like I want to understand your perspective. Doesn't mean I will agree with the perspective, but I do want to understand where you're coming from, just so that I know what's important to you, because it's important. You are an important person to me, and I want to understand why you find this important, even if I don't agree with it. Okay? And one of the best examples I had is a friend of mine at work. Her and I, we didn't see eye to eye on Trump. And it could have got into a huge battle. And we're Canadian, so it's like it's not even an issue for us. But at the same time, it was back and forth. So I was very upset, anti-Trump, and she was very pro-Trump. And she was like, oh, this is going to be great, blah, blah, blah. It's funny now, I'm much more open on that subject. However, there's some things that I still would choose to do differently. That being said, if you can get to the point where you can reasonably talk with somebody that you don't actually agree with, that you can hear their point of view, that you can understand what it is that they're going for, you have a much better chance of collaboration. You have a much better chance in your negotiations as well, because if you are so fixated on the my way or the highway kind of thing, that's not a good way to be, right? And you will end up losing out on some deals that you probably could have won over if you had sought to understand the other person's perspective a little bit better. So her and I, we had a discussion back and forth, and it was, I have to give her credit, because she was actually the more reasonable one. I was a little bit more emotional about it, but she really wanted to understand my perspective. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I explained why I felt the way I felt, and she's like, okay, I can understand that. And I'm like, okay, so why are you in favor of him? And she explained her reasons of why, and I was like, okay, I can kind of see that, because it's like she was coming at it more from a business perspective, and I'm like, okay, business, that makes sense, that's logical, I can see where the value is of that. Hey Jenica, thank you so much. Thank you for the roses. So understanding these different perspectives and coming at it, even if you're passionate about it, that you're coming at it from a place of still wanting to protect the person that you're actually talking with, that you're not deliberately trying to tear them down, and that requires you to do that inner work yourself, because if you don't do that inner work, you are much more likely to react, which means you're not responding, and then, oh, I think the live is telling me it's almost time to wrap up. There we go. I never had that before on TikTok. Oh, interesting. Okay. So it looks like I have a time limit on TikTok, so I'll be wrapping up, but we are getting to the end of the conversation. For those of you that jumped in a little bit late, I will be posting this on my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125, and you can take a listen there and watch the replays and all of that kind of stuff, okay? So guys, whatever conversations that you're having, if you're having difficult conversations, if you're dealing with anger, make sure that you're using I statements. Make sure that you are coming from an intended perspective. Set the intention for the conversation of what you would like to see the ideal outcome be. That you want it to be something that is where you both feel heard, you both feel understood, and even if you can't come to a resolution, at the very least, that you don't come out of it as enemies, okay? So that is a much better perspective, and to make sure that both of you are managing your reactions and asking for what you need. So if it gets to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm about to lose it, so I think we need to pause things right now, and I just don't want to react badly. I do want to continue this conversation, and we can come back to it, okay? So being able to ask, and first of all, know what it is that you actually need, and then be able to ask for that in a way that is calm and you can do that when you deal with it when it's small. If you let things build up, it's next to impossible to stay that calm, and you will react with it. And if you have a big reaction, oftentimes that's also a signal that it's past trauma that's also infiltrating what's going on today, and it's not just the situation that you have at hand. Maybe it's all the other times in the past that you're ready to blow up about, and it's like you're like, yeah, here it is again, and now you feel justified because in the past you experienced certain things. I've done that many times. Really important. Don't react, guys. Respond. Okay? So guys, we're going to wrap this up tonight. Like I said, check out my YouTube channel. I will be uploading the recording there, and we will see you again tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern, or 9 p.m.-ish Eastern. All right? Take care, guys. Have a great day. Bye.